The broadcast regulator, Ofcom, has been given more powers to investigate bias at the BBC following a review into the broadcaster's impartiality and complaints system.
It's all part of the government's plan to boost public confidence and trust in the BBC. We're joined now by the Culture Secretary, Lucy Frazer. Very good morning to you. Do you trust the BBC?
The BBC is a fantastic institution, one of our greatest public institutions, but it's really important that the public maintains trust in it. And what we've heard is that the public, some of the audiences feel like the BBC is biased, and some of them are very frustrated by the complaints system. So what we're announcing today is an enhancement to impartiality and also further independent scrutiny of the complaints system, so that audiences feel that they're being listened to and heard.
Which parts of the BBC are biased?
Well, this isn't a question about what I think. This is following on a review of evidence. We've spoken to a lot of people. We've looked at Ofcom studies.
And what does the review say that people are worried about? Which parts of the BBC are viewers worried are biased?
Well, let me tell you some of the statistics. So in terms of impartiality, last year, 39% of complaints were about the BBC's impartiality, whereas the previous year they were 19.
OK, but so I'm just trying to establish, what is the BBC not impartial on?
And so a large part of that will be about its news, but also in its programming as a whole.
OK, but what issue are they? Because, I mean, it could be, for instance, if you look at something like Brexit, I don't know, but you might have half the people saying they're impartial for Remain, half the people saying they're not impartial for Remain, half the people saying they're not impartial for Brexit. What are they actually... And then that would count, I suppose, as impartiality. What are people actually complaining that the BBC is not impartial about?
Well, you're right to highlight that sometimes people will complain about the same programme from different perspectives. That's absolutely right. But what we're highlighting is that the BBC has set out a 10-point plan in relation to impartiality because it realises that this is fundamentally important. And what we're saying in this review is what it needs to do is be more transparent about its impartiality, what it's doing, how it's monitoring it. We're giving the board greater powers in order to oversee complaints, largely that are about impartiality, so that it itself can monitor and improve on the areas that people are complaining about.
I'm sorry, you talk about transparency, about impartiality. I'm just not sure what you think the BBC is not impartial on. What is BBC News getting wrong? Is there a particular report or a particular issue or a particular programme or a particular reporter?
Well, let's take, for instance, the recent coverage in relation to Gaza and Israel. What we saw there was that the BBC, there's been a significant number of complaints in relation to its coverage as a whole, and what we've also seen is that it did make an error it accepted in relation to the bombing of the hospital, for which it apologised. But this report isn't about taking specific examples and saying you're doing this wrong here. It's saying that the public are perceiving, have a growing level of mistrust and the impartiality of the BBC, and therefore this is something that the board needs to continue to monitor, be transparent about, and we need to give greater powers to the board to monitor this issue so that it can improve overall.
OK, that was a factual error for which the BBC apologised. Do you think, just finally, do you think that's evidence that the BBC is biased against Israel?
Look, this isn't about my view about the BBC. So you asked me for a particular example, so I thought it was important to give you a concrete example. But what I'm saying is that audiences across the board have lost trust in the impartiality of the BBC to some extent, and therefore it's important, and the BBC absolutely accepts, they accept all our recommendations, that there is more to do in this area.
Can I ask you about an area where your view is relevant? Which is the bid to buy the Daily Telegraph, which you've referred unusually to Ofcom and the competition authorities to investigate. Now, you won't comment on what they're going to report in the next few days, but what was it about a member of the royal family in UAE buying the Daily Telegraph which worried you enough to refer it? And why are you worried about the Daily Telegraph being owned by that individual, but not Manchester City Football Club?
So, Ed, you will know, and you've pointed out that I have a role in this process. It's a quasi-judicial role, so I'm limited in what I can say about.
No, but you didn't have to do it, and you chose to do it. So, what was the reason you chose to refer it? It was a discretionary decision.
Well, let me tell you the structure under which I operate, and that is I have powers in relation to media mergers. And I can look at media mergers when they cross a particular financial threshold and there's a particular impact. And what I can look at is whether there is going to be a concern in relation to freedom of the press, and that is something that I have asked the CMA and Ofcom to look at.
But you didn't have to, so you chose to. So prima facie, you're worried that this could lead to an erosion of press freedom because of a UAE individual of the royal family owning the Daily Telegraph. You are, in principle, worried about that?
Ed, I've told you the threshold. Obviously, as I've referred this to the CMA and to Ofcom, I believe that it's past that threshold that is set out in the legislation, and they will be reporting to me on it.
Right, I just want to ask about an issue that's concerned people this morning on both sides of this particular debate, and that is that the Scottish transgender golfer Hayley Davidson is making waves in the world of golf. She's won a women's event last week in Florida. Now, it could mean that eventually, because this is part of a development programme for eventually perhaps the Ladies Professional Golf Association Tour, she could eventually get a place on the LPGA. Now, she acknowledges being born into a male body gives an advantage, although she has gone through transition. Do you think that it's fair that she is able to compete at that level?
No, I think this is a really important issue, and many national governing bodies in elite sport have put in rules around this, which I think is absolutely right, because at the heart of this, we should have fairness, fairness of women to be able to compete in an equal way. And when you compete against men who are biologically, transgender women who are biologically born men, that isn't fair. So I know a number of governing bodies have looked at this and have highlighted the importance of fairness.
Yes, the LPGA Tour removed its female at birth requirement in 2010, but World Athletics has banned transgender women who've gone through male puberty from elite female competitions. World Aquatics made a similar decision in 2022. Are you suggesting that golf should align itself with those organisations?
Well, you're right to highlight those organisations that have already gone down that road, and I think rowing is another one. Look, these national bodies are looking at this, and I would encourage them to follow the course that others have gone down on the grounds of fairness.
We were hearing shortly earlier Secretary of State from Louise Huxley, whose brother died of an issue which came as a result of him receiving contaminated blood in the 1980s. And there is a huge pressure for compensation. Can you tell us when the decisions will be made about compensation for those tens of thousands of victims? And in particular, will it happen before the budget?
Well, you will know this has been an issue that's gone before Parliament recently. It's always been the government's case and position that people should be compensated. We've already paid out significant sums in compensation. This was a terrible scandal that's affected so many people. It's right that they get compensation. And that will be coming very shortly. Obviously, the exact timing is a matter for the Treasury and the relevant departments, but the government takes this extremely seriously.
Do you know what the potential bill is?
I'm not sure exactly the money at stake, but we have said very, very clearly that this is that we will be giving compensation. We've already given a significant amount in interim compensation, And it's absolutely right that we do that.
Lucy Frazer, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much.